Jake Miller walked up the metal ramp that led into the Celestial Pathfinder, holding a small plastic card tightly in his hands. It was his ticket for first class. He kept staring at it as if it would vanish if he blinked too hard. He had worked for this for 5 long years. 5 years of squeezing into tight engine spaces where the heat made his skin feel like it was cooking. 5 years of fixing holes in starship hulls while floating in the cold, dark space. He put every extra credit he had into his savings account. No fancy food. No new clothes. No going out with friends at night. Work and save, then work and save some more. And now, at last, he had enough for something special. A real break. Seats in first class. Real legroom. Maybe even good food that didn't taste like cardboard that had been used before. There were a lot of people at the boarding gate. Jake had never seen so many different kinds of aliens in one place before. There were Quillians with a lot of thin tentacles that they waved around as they talked to each other. Their skin sparkled with colors that changed with their moods. A group of Zenthari stood nearby, looking like crystal sculptures that could walk. Light bent and bounced off their bodies in patterns that looked like rainbows. And then there were the Draconi. Huge dragon-like animals that made even the tallest people look small. Some had scales that shone like metal that had been polished. Some had wings so big that they had to keep them folded tightly against their backs so they wouldn't hit anyone. The sound was beyond belief. Languages that are different from each other. Speakers above made loud announcements. As they rolled by, the luggage carts made a beeping sound. Kids of all kinds ran around while their parents tried to keep an eye on them. Jake was trying to get through all of this mess when something caught his eye. Movement that looked different from the rest. Less quickly. Harder. An old Draconi was trying to get through the crowd, but it was hard for him. Jake could tell that his scales had once been a bright red color. But now they looked dull and faded, like paint that had been left out in the sun for too long. They had changed to a soft, dusty rose color. His wings dragged behind him a little, leaving faint marks on the shiny floor. Jake could see that they had scars all over them. Tears that had healed but left scars that would never go away. A purple sash with symbols sewn into it hung across the dragon's wide chest. Jake knew it right away. A sash for veterans. This dragon had been in wars. Had been in a fight. Had lived through things that most beings did not. The attendants in their crisp uniforms were showing the old dragon the way to the economy class boarding line. They talked to each other politely but firmly while looking at their tablets and pointing. The dragon slowly nodded and began to move in that direction. He walked carefully. Measured. Like each one took work. Jake felt something turn in his chest. He had come back to Earth a few months ago for the memorial service for his father. His father had been in the army. Had fought in the Outer Colonies War 20 years ago. Jake remembered going to see him in the Veterans Hospital before he died. He thought about the other old soldiers who were there, sitting in chairs that were too small and dealing with pain that never quite went away, with staff who were nice but too busy to really help. He remembered his father telling him that the hardest part wasn't the injuries or the bad dreams. It was like not being seen. It felt like the galaxy had moved on and forgotten what they had given up. Jake looked at his first-class ticket again. 22A. More room for your legs. Seats that recline. You might even be able to see out the window. He had been dreaming about this for a long time. Then he saw the old dragon, who was now in line for the economy. He thought about the cheap seats. Jake wasn't a big guy, but he still thought they were too small and uncomfortable. He had flown in economy class many times. Your knees were against the seat in front of you. You hit the person next to you with your elbows. There wasn't even enough room to breathe, let alone sleep, on a long flight. It was annoying for a person. It would be torture for a Draconi, especially one with old wounds and scarred wings. 14 hours of pure pain. Jake made up his mind before he could change it. He pushed through the crowd, avoiding a family of Quillians and stepping over someone's bags. Jake got to the old dragon just in time to board. "Excuse me, sir?" Jake said, panting a little. The dragon spun around. His eyes were very old. A deep gold color with bits of amber. Eyes that had watched hundreds of years go by. Eyes that looked tired in a way that made it clear they needed more than just sleep. They looked at Jake with both caution and interest. "Yes, person?" His voice was deep and rough, like the sound of gravel rolling around in a metal drum. Jake felt very small and very young all of a sudden. How old was he? 32? This thing in front of him had probably lived 10 times as long. But Jake kept going anyway. "Hi, I'm Jake. Jake Miller. I have a first-class ticket. 22A. It has a lot more space than economy. Big chairs. Extra room." He was talking too fast and rambling. "I was thinking, well, you probably need that space more than I do. So, could we trade? You can have my first-class seat and I'll take whatever seat you have." The dragon looked at him. Did not move. Didn't say anything. Just looked. Jake couldn't help but keep talking. The economy seats are pretty small and I thought, with your wings and everything it might be better if... Why would you do this? The dragon asked. His eyes had become slits. Not sure. What do you want from me, human? Jake blinked. What? I don't want anything. I just thought you'd be more comfortable in first class. People don't give things away for free. The dragon's voice was flat. Matter of fact. This is a trick. You want cash. Or you want others to see you doing this so they think well of you. Or you want me to be in debt to you. Jake's face got hot. He understood how this must look. People in the galaxy didn't have a good reputation. People knew them as smart traders who were always looking for a way to make money. Because they were tough soldiers who didn't care about anyone. Because they were brilliant engineers who cared more about their machines than about people. No one thought of people as kind or generous, especially not to other species. My dad was a soldier, Jake said in a low voice. Army. Fought in the Outer Colonies War. I saw what he went through when he got home. The hurt. The fight. How people acted like he was just taking up space. Jake held out his ticket and his hand was steady. Sir, I know how much service costs. I know what people like you give up so that people like me can safely travel through space. This isn't a joke. It's only a seat. You ought to have it. The dragon, who called himself Flamekeeper Rothax, looked at the ticket Jake was holding. Then they looked back at Jake's face. Then look at the ticket again. It took a whole minute. The line behind them was getting impatient. People were starting to talk and point. Rothax finally reached out with one huge clawed hand and took the ticket. It looked like it took a lot of effort. He said slowly, I don't understand you, Jake Miller. But I agree. They traded tickets right there. Jake took his economy class boarding pass and went to his new seat, 87B, which was all the way in the back by the engines. As he squeezed into the small seat and put his backpack under the seat in front of him, he saw a Zenthri merchant a few rows up. Jake knew she was confused because her crystalline face was changing colors as she whispered to her travel partner. Did that person just help someone? She asked in a low voice. For free? I've never seen one do that before. Jake sat down and felt his knees press against the back of the seat in front of him. He smiled to himself. It was only a seat. Not a big deal. He shut his eyes and tried to relax. The engines roared to life below him. Jake fell asleep within minutes because he was tired from the long day. He had no idea that giving up that seat would start something that would change the whole galaxy forever. Jake woke up to a noise he had never heard before. His communication device was buzzing so loudly that it fell off the small fold-out tray and onto the floor. It kept going off even when it was stuck between his feet. Buzz after buzz after buzz. The screen was flashing like fireworks. What the hell? Jake mumbled, still half asleep. He bent down to get the device and because there wasn't much room, he almost hit his head on the seat in front of him. His tired brain couldn't figure out what he was seeing when he looked at the screen. The counter for notifications had stopped working. For messages, it just said, 999 plus. There were thousands of unread messages in his email inbox. News alerts were piling up so quickly that they were pushing older ones off the screen before he could read them. Jake rubbed his eyes hard and looked again, thinking he might still be dreaming. No. There are still thousands of messages. His heart began to race. Did something happen? Was there an emergency at home? Did someone get hurt? He started to scroll through the messages to see if he could find one from a friend. But they were all from people he didn't know. He got interview requests from news networks he had never heard of. Messages from people whose names he couldn't even say. There were subject lines in a dozen different languages, and some of them were hard for his translator device to understand. Excuse me, a voice said from the seat in front of him. Jake raised his head. Aquilian had turned around and was looking at him over the back of the seat. Jake's cultural training told him that the way her tentacles were arranged showed that she was excited. Her skin was changing from pink to orange, which meant she was either happy or curious or both. Yes, you are him, she said, her translator making her voice sound musical. You are the person in the video. What video? Jake asked, really confused. The Quillian's tentacles moved around even more, showing how excited they were. She held up her own device and turned it so Jake could see the screen. There was a video playing. Jake knew the boarding gate from the day before. He saw himself walk up to Rothax. He saw himself giving the ticket. You could see Jake's face clearly as he talked to the old dragon because the video was shot from behind them. You could see the exact moment Rothax took the ticket. The video was very clear. Jake's stomach dropped. Someone had written that down? Why would anyone want to record that? He then looked at the view counter at the bottom of the video. 17 million people have seen it. 17 million. In less than a day. Is this real? Human displays unprecedented cross-species empathy, was the headline above the video. There were thousands and thousands of comments below that. Jake began to read them and his hands shook a little. This has to be staged. People don't do things like this. I've worked with people for 30 years. I've never seen one help another species without expecting something in return. Propaganda. Before the next round of trade talks, Commonwealth is trying to improve people's reputations. My dad always said that people of other races didn't have any honor. This video can't be real. But there were also other comments that were not skeptical. I'm crying. This is the most beautiful thing I've seen in a long time. Could we have been wrong about people? Let everyone see this. The galaxy must see this. Jake's face had turned white. He looked up at the Quillian who was watching him with all 6 of her eyes. I just gave an old man a better seat, Jake said in a weak voice. That's it. The Quillian's skin turned a deep blue, which meant she was feeling something strong. That's why this is news, she said quietly. We've never seen a person do something like that before. Not for another kind. Not without wanting something in return. She turned back around in her seat, and Jake was shocked to see her looking at her phone. Things got worse over the next few hours. Or maybe even better. Jake couldn't figure it out anymore. 3 different news organizations were able to get in touch with him directly through the ship's communication system. They wanted to talk to them. They wanted to know what made him do it. They were curious about what he wanted to gain. They wanted to know everything about his life. Jake did the interviews because he didn't know how to say no. He sat in his small economy seat, holding his device up so they could see his face and kept answering the same questions. Why did you give up your seat in first class? Because he needed it more than I did. What did you want in return? Nothing. I didn't want anything. Are you a member of the Commonwealth Diplomatic Corps? I'm a mechanic. My job is to fix engines. This has to be part of a bigger plan by people. It's not a plan. It's just being a good person. By the end of the 3rd interview, other people on the bus were watching him. A few people looked interested. Some people looked like they were up to something. Some of them looked mad as if he had done something wrong by being nice. Jake put his phone away and tried to figure out what was going on. He had been in space for 7 years working on different ships and stations. He was aware of the reputation people had out here. People looked up to them because of how good they were at what they did. Engineers could fix anything. Soldiers were tough and followed orders. People who traded with each other always got the best deals. But being liked was not the same as being respected. Not the same as being trusted. Jake had seen it in little ways over the years. How other animals would count their money twice after doing business with a person. How parents would pull their kids a little closer when people walked by. The fact that his co-workers from other species were nice to him at work but never invited him to their homes or social events. He had always thought that was just how things were. People were the newest members of the galactic community. It has only been a part of the Commonwealth for 200 years. That was nothing compared to species that had been flying through space for thousands of years. They might have just needed more time to get used to people. But as he watched those comments go by on the video and read what people really thought about humans, Jake realized that the problem was worse than he had thought. People didn't just think of humans as new. They thought people were cold, selfish, not able to really care about anyone who wasn't human. And the worst part? Jake could see why they thought that. Most of the people he met in space were either in the military, worked for a company, or were research scientists. They acted like professionals. They were focused and did their jobs well, but they didn't talk to anyone else. They weren't rude, but they weren't friendly either. They were just very good at what they did. Jake thought about the people who lived next door to him on Earth. Mrs. Patterson made cookies for everyone on the block every Christmas. Mr. Rodriguez worked on cars for free on the weekends. The community garden where people from all over the world worked together and shared what they grew. The fire department that is made up of volunteers. The small libraries that are free on the street. How people helped each other after storms or other bad times. That was also human. But none of those people ever went to space. People who wanted to make money, have fun, or get famous went to space. They weren't bad people, but they didn't represent everyone back home either. There was a crackling sound on the ship's intercom. In 30 minutes they would be at Kepler Station. Jake's phone buzzed again. A request for another interview. He didn't pay attention to it. But then he saw that a new video had been uploaded. This one came from first class. Someone had talked to Rodhax. Jake tapped it and looked. The old dragon was sitting in seat 22A, which was Jake's seat. He looked more comfortable than Jake had seen him at the boarding gate. As he spoke, the camera zoomed in on his face. In a deep, rumbling voice, the dragon said, "I am Flamekeeper Rothax. I fought in the Void Border Wars 300 years ago. All of my battalion died. 247 dragons. I saw them die. I was the only one who lived." The camera stayed still on his face. His golden eyes looked far away like they were remembering. "I've lived a long time since then. I've seen a lot. I've been in other wars. I have lost friends and family. I have gained wealth and respect. But I've also gathered pain. My wings don't work the way they used to. My bones hurt. Long flights are torture for me." Rothax looked straight into the camera. "I knew I would be in a lot of pain for 14 hours when I got on this ship yesterday. The seats in economy class aren't made for people my size. I agreed to this because I'm old and tired and didn't have the energy to complain. I thought that was just how things are now. The galaxy has moved on. Old soldiers are forgotten." He spoke more softly. "Then this person came up to me. This is Jake Miller. He gave me his first-class seat. I thought it was a joke. I thought that people didn't do things like that. They are great at a lot of things, but being kind to other species? I had never seen it before." Rothax stopped. When he spoke again, his voice was full of emotion that Jake didn't think dragons could feel. But he kept saying. He didn't want anything from me. He just saw an old soldier and thought I needed some comfort. Do you know how unusual that is? I have been alive for 412 years. I have been to 600 worlds. I've met people from 1,000 different species. This person, who I didn't know, showed me more real kindness in 2 minutes than anyone else outside of my own kind has in the last 100 years. The dragon's eyes were bright now. Were those tears? Could dragons cry? Rothax said, looking straight into the camera. "If one random person can be so kind, what else have we gotten wrong about people?" The video was over. Jake sat in his small seat and looked at the blank screen. His chest was tight. Other passengers were looking at their own devices, and a lot of them were watching the same video. The cabin's mood had changed completely. People were looking at him in a new way. Not with doubt. With something else. Maybe it's curiosity. Or wish. As the ship got closer to the dock, it shook a little. Jake looked out the little window next to him. Kepler Station was coming into view, and its huge ring structure was sparkling with a million lights in the dark of space. He was on vacation here. 2 weeks of relaxing on the beach and not having to think about work. He had a feeling that those plans had changed completely. Jake walked down the Celestial Pathfinder's exit ramp with his backpack over one shoulder and a stiff neck from sleeping in the cramped economy seat. After being folded up for 14 hours, his legs felt like they were made of wood. He just wanted to get to his hotel, take a long shower, and maybe find a quiet beach where no one would recognize him from that dumb video. The docking gate at Kepler Station was huge, at least 3 times the size of the boarding area where they started. The big windows showed how the planet curved below, with blue oceans and green continents. There were stores and restaurants along the concourse. Holographic ads floated in the air, showing off everything from vacation packages to the newest models of personal spacecraft. Like a living river, thousands of people moved through the space. Jake walked into the crowd and saw him right away. Rothax was right by the exit of the gate. You can't miss it. The old dragon was at least 9 feet tall, and the light from above made his faded red scales shine. He still had his purple veteran sash across his chest. Those old golden eyes were fixed on Jake as soon as he showed up. Jake stopped moving. What was Rothax doing here? Did something go wrong with the seat? Was the dragon mad about something? Hey, Jake said as he walked over in a strange way. He didn't know what to say to a dragon war hero who was 400 years old. Hope the seat worked out for you. Rothax stood up straight and tall. His voice could be heard all over the gate area when he spoke. People nearby stopped what they were doing and stared. Jake Miller, Rothax said formally, in Draconi culture, what you have done for me means that I owe you my life. I owe you an honor debt that I need to pay back. Jake's face started to get hot. People were definitely looking at them now. Some people were holding up their phones, which was probably recording this. You really don't owe me anything, Jake said quickly. It was only a seat change. Not a big deal. Rothax kept going as if Jake hadn't said anything. I am Flamekeeper Rothax, the last living member of the Crimson Wing Battalion. The Draconi Collective gave me the Star Talon, which is the highest military honor. I have made it through 13 big campaigns in 3 different wars. I have gained a lot of wealth and power over the course of my 400 years of life. Jake felt like the dragon's eyes were 2 suns. Jake Miller, name your price. If I can do it, you can have it. Jake's mind went completely blank. What is the price? He didn't do this for money. He did it because it was the right thing to do. It seemed wrong to him that he should get paid for being a decent person. I don't want money, Jake said, and he meant it. I just wanted you to be at ease on the plane. That's it. Rodhax looked genuinely shocked for the first time since Jake had met him. His eyes got bigger. His head pulled back a little. You won't pay. The dragon's voice was full of doubt. Jake tried to explain, it wasn't a transaction, sir. I didn't give you that seat so you would owe me something. It was the right thing to do. You helped your people. You fought in wars. You should be treated with respect. That means having enough space on a flight. The area around the gate was quiet. Now everyone was watching. Jake could see dozens of cameras aimed at them, recording everything they said. Rodhax looked at Jake for a long time. No one moved. No one said anything. Then the dragon made a noise that Jake had never heard before. It was low and rumbling like rocks grinding together deep in the ground. Jake didn't get that Rodhax was laughing for a second. Rodhax said, You are either the wisest person I have ever met or the strangest. His boulder laugh stopped. I really can't tell which one it is. With one huge clawed hand, the dragon pointed to the concourse. Come with me, Jake Miller. We need to talk, but I don't think either of us wants to do it in front of all these cameras. Jake looked around at all the people who were looking at them. Okay, yeah, that's a good idea. It was quite a sight to see them walk through the station together. A 32-year-old mechanic in a wrinkled jumpsuit walking next to a 9-foot-tall dragon war hero. People got out of the way. Some people bowed to Rodhax in respect. People whispered and pointed at Jake. A few people asked for pictures, but Jake politely said no. There were already a lot of videos of him. Rodhax took them to a quiet cafe that was hidden away in a part of the station that didn't get a lot of traffic. The furniture was made for different types of people so it could fit a wide range of customers. Rodhax sat down on a reinforced platform made for big people. Jake sat down in a regular chair across from him and asked for coffee. Not the fake coffee they served on ships, but real coffee. The server brought out something that Rodhax had ordered in what looked like a small barrel. The liquid inside was silver and looked like it was shining. Mercury in liquid form? Jake asked as Rodhax took a long drink. Close. It is a mineral compound that comes from my home world. It would be very poisonous for you. Rodhax put the barrel down. Now, Jake Miller. I think you don't really know who I am, so let me tell you. Jake learned a lot of things about Rodhax in the next hour that made his head spin. The dragon wasn't just rich. He was known to be very rich. Rodhax was one of the richest people in this part of space after 400 years of smart investments, business ventures, and compound interest. He owned land on 40 different worlds. He owned a controlling stake in 3 big companies. He had enough money to buy a small moon if he wanted to. I have more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes, Rodhax said. I don't have any family to leave it to. The people I was in a clutch with died in the wars. I never had kids. Right now, my money just sits in accounts that I don't check very often. Jake took a sip of his coffee and tried to figure this out. Why are you telling me this? Because I want you to know what I'm giving you. Rodhax bent over. I'll pay for your business. A repair shop just for you. Not a little garage. A real operation. New diagnostic tools that are on the cutting edge. The best tools that money can buy. The best facilities available. You might have everything you need to make something big. Jake leaned back in his chair. It was a kind offer. Very kind. He could stop working for other people and be his own boss with that kind of support. He could pick his own projects. Set his own hours. You could even hire other mechanics and make jobs. It was hard to resist. Very tempting. But Jake didn't like something about it. He thought about his dad again. I thought about those old veterans who were in the hospital. Thought about Rodhax himself and how he would have to suffer for 14 hours because no one cared enough to help. What if we tried something new? Jake said it slowly and the idea came to him as he spoke. What if we set up something to help people like you instead of just my business? Rodhax turned his head. What do you mean? Free repairs for veterans? Jake said, getting more into the idea. Any kind of species. It doesn't matter what branch of the military they were in or what war they fought in. We fix their ships for free if they risk their lives for their people. No cost. Without any strings attached. The dragon's eyes got bigger. You want to spend my money on people you don't know? On people who deserved it, Jake said. Give it some thought. There are veterans from 100 different species all over Commonwealth space. Many of them are having a hard time. They have health problems because of their service. Psychological trauma. It's hard for them to find work because they're older, hurt, or dealing with things that civilians don't understand. They also have to keep their own spaceships in good shape or pay for transportation, which is expensive. Jake was getting more excited and speaking faster. We give them ships that work. We fix their engines, patch up their hulls, and improve their systems. For nothing. That way they can go to job interviews. Go to other worlds to see family. Have some freedom and movement. It's not a gift. It's giving back to people who gave everything for the rest of us. Rothax was very quiet. He stayed still. Did not talk. He just looked at Jake with those old golden eyes. Finally, the dragon asked, "Would you do this? You would take my offer of personal wealth and use it to help other people?" Jake said simply, "That way your money would help a lot more people. And to be honest, I believe it would mean more. I don't need to be wealthy. I just need enough to get by. But there are veterans out there who really need help." More quiet. Jake began to worry that he had upset Rothax in some way. Dragons might not have liked being told how to spend their money. Rothax's bolder laugh started up again, this time louder. People in the cafe turned to look when the dragon laughed so hard. When he could speak again, Rothax said, "Incredible. I can't believe it. Anyone else in this galaxy would have taken my money and run. Would have set themselves up for life and never looked back." The dragon shook its big head. "But you, Jake Miller. You want to help people you don't know. You want to help those who served. Is that a yes?" Jake asked with hope. Rothax's eyes shone. "Yes, human. We will do this. We will make something good. Something that pays tribute to what service really means." They shook hands on it. Jake did his best to shake Rothax's huge claw. The dragon's scales were warm and surprisingly smooth. Rothax said, "We will call it Veterans Harbor. A safe place for those who fought the storms." The news got out to the public in less than a week. At the station, Rothax and Jake held a press conference. The news spread like wildfire across the galactic network. All Commonwealth veterans, no matter what species they are or what war they fought in, can get their starships fixed for free. Flamekeeper Rothax paid for it and Jake Miller planned and ran it. The response was quick and huge. Jake's personal messages blew up again, but this time it was different. These people were not journalists looking for interviews. These were people from all over the galaxy. Mechanics who are willing to give their time for free. Engineers who want to give away tools. Welders, electricians, and computer techs are all people who are willing to help. One message said, "I can give 10 hours a week. I have extra parts in storage." Another person said, "You can have it all. I used to be a mechanic in the Navy. Where do I sign up?" Jake sat in the temporary office they had rented on Kepler Station and read message after message. People on faraway colonies, space stations, and even Earth itself have offered to help. People he had never met were willing to give their time and money to help veterans of species they had never even seen before. The galactic network was busy again. The same news outlets that had doubted whether his first act of kindness was real were now asking a new question. What is happening with humanity? This was no longer just one person doing something nice. Hundreds of people volunteered to help thousands of alien veterans without getting paid or getting any credit. The galaxy had seen it. And the galaxy was really confused. When Rothax walked into the office, Jake looked up from his device and saw him duck his head to fit through the door. The dragon asked, "How many volunteers do you have now?" 472, Jake said, still shocked by the number. "And more are coming." Rothax made a rumbling noise that showed he was happy. "Jake Miller, your kind never ceases to amaze me." Jake said, "We're surprising ourselves too. I think we forgot that the rest of the galaxy was watching. We were just being ourselves." Kepler Station kept spinning around and around outside their office window. Ships came and went. Life went on. But something had changed. The galaxy's view of humanity had changed in a big way. It all started when one man gave up a comfy seat because he thought it was the right thing to do. It had been 6 months since Jake gave up his first-class seat, and he still couldn't believe how different his life was now. He stood in the middle of the main Veterans Harbor workshop on Kepler Station, watching as things fell apart in a controlled way. The area was huge, at least 3 football fields long. There were 40 repair bays lined up in neat rows, and each one had the kind of tools Jake used to dream about when he worked in small stations with old tools. All of the bays were full. Every single one. A woman named Riley was working under a Zenthari personal craft in Bay 7. Her legs were sticking out from under the crystal hull. She was yelling at her assistant, a young Zenthari who was learning how to use technology that wasn't made of crystals for the first time. In Bay 15, a big Draconi firesmith named Korvax was carefully welding a hole in the hull of an old military transport. Danny, a human welder, stood next to him and watched, taking notes. The Draconi heated the metal with biological fire from their own bodies. Danny was trying to figure out how to do that with tools made by people. 3 Quillian engineers and 2 humans were working together in Bay 23 to completely rebuild the engine core of a ship that had fought in the border conflicts 40 years ago. The Quillian's tentacles moved with amazing accuracy, getting into places that human fingers could never reach. The people gave the raw strength needed to move the heavy parts. It was pretty. It was a mess. It was noisy. And it was doing its job. Jake walked between the bays to check on how things were going, answer questions, and fix problems. A Zen-3 veteran came up to him. Her body was made of crystals, which made the workshop lights shine in rainbow patterns on the floor. "Mr. Miller," she said, her voice sounding musical because of the translator, "my ship is ready. I was told that it would take 3 weeks and cost more than I could afford, but your team has done it in 3 days." Jake smiled. "That's why we're here. You were in the Crystal Wars, right?" 15 years of service, she said in a low voice. "I lost 2 arms in the last battle." She pointed to her left side, where the crystal structure was clearly different from her right. "New limbs that grow back after an injury. I never thought anyone would help me for free, especially not people." Jake said, "Well, we're full of surprises. Your ship is in Bay 12. It's ready for you whenever you are." The Zen-3 stood there for a moment, and Jake's cultural training told him that the way her body changed colors showed that she was very upset. She then bowed, which is a sign of deep respect in her culture, and walked to her ship. Jake's phone buzzed in his pocket. He took it out and saw that someone with diplomatic credentials from Earth was calling him. He let out a sigh. This had been happening a lot lately. He walked into his small office off the main workshop floor and answered the phone. There was a holographic picture in front of him. A woman in her 50s who works for the Diplomatic Corps of Earth and wears the formal uniform. Her name tag said she was Ambassador Patricia Hayes. "Mr. Miller," she said, her voice professional but urgent. "We need to talk about what's going on." Jake started, "If this is about the workshop expansion, we have all the permits." "This isn't about permits," Ambassador Hayes cut in. "This is about every diplomatic deal that Earth is currently working on. All of them have changed. A lot." Jake frowned. "I don't get it. What does that have to do with me?" The ambassador laughed, but it wasn't a happy laugh. "Everything, Mr. Miller. It has everything to do with you. Here are some examples. The Zen-3 Consortium just gave us a permanent spot on their trade council. For 50 years we have been trying to get that seat. 50 years of talks, deals, and careful diplomacy. Every time we asked them they said no, saying that people couldn't be trusted with that much economic power." She stopped and stared at Jake through the hologram. "Last week they got in touch with us and said they had changed their minds. They want us to be on the council. They said, recent events have made us rethink what we know about human culture and values." Jake moved around in an uncomfortable way. "That's good news, isn't it?" The ambassador went on, "It gets better. We were asked to join the research partnership on quantum entanglement by the Quillian Science Collective. The Draconi Collective has made a military cooperation agreement offer that is much better than any of their previous ones. 3 different groups have asked us about programs for cultural exchange. And the Krovan, who have never trusted people, are suddenly interested in trade talks." "Okay," Jake said slowly. "But what does that have to do with Veterans Harbor?" "All of it," Ambassador Hayes said, her voice getting a little louder. "Can't you see? You showed them something they had never seen before. You showed them that people can be truly kind to other species without expecting anything in return. You showed them that we care about honor, service, and taking care of those who have served. Every diplomat in the Commonwealth is talking about you and what you've done here." Jake sat down hard in his chair. "I just fixed some boats." The ambassador said firmly, "No. You showed them what we're really like. People have always been this way, but they never got to see it before." Jake began to pay more attention to the news feeds from all over the galaxy in the days that followed. He was shocked by what he saw. Dr. Quillix, a Quillian sociologist, had written a research paper that was spreading across the galactic network faster than any other academic work Jake had ever heard of. The title was "The Human Paradox, Solved: Why We Misunderstood Humanity for 2 Centuries." Jake read the paper 3 times in an effort to understand all of the academic language. But the main point was easy to see, and to be honest, it was kind of obvious once someone pointed it out. Dr. Quillix had looked at every recorded interaction between people and other species over the last 200 years. She had looked at trade talks, military operations, scientific collaborations, and diplomatic meetings. And she had found a pattern. The people that other species met were not typical of all people. They were a certain group. They were corporate contractors who had been taught how to make the most money. They were soldiers who had been trained to follow orders and fight well. Their only job was to look at data and make new discoveries. Dr. Quillick said, "These people were doing their jobs. They were doing their jobs well. But we made a big mistake. We thought that the way people acted at work was the same way they acted all the time. We thought that human soldiers stood for all of humanity. That human traders stood for all of humanity. That scientists were human beings who spoke for all of humanity." The paper then talked about what the Commonwealth had missed. There were a lot of people on Earth who never left. Teachers who dedicated their entire lives to instructing children. People who made art just for the sake of making it. People who helped their communities without getting paid. Parents who put their kids first. People who lived next door to each other and cared for each other. People who lived normal lives and were nice to each other because that's what you did. Dr. Quillick said that Jake Miller is not special among people. He's just like everyone else. That is what makes this so important. He is what humans have always been, but the Commonwealth never saw him because those people never went to space. We thought that meeting the professionals of humanity was all there was to it. We made a mistake. Millions of people downloaded the paper. Jake saw it mentioned in news stories, opinion pieces, and academic discussions about a lot of different species. Now, people were saying different things about humans. It wasn't just talk either. Things were really changing. There had been a 300% rise in human tourism to alien worlds in the last 6 months. But these people were not scientists or business people. These were families on vacation. People who are retired or exploring the galaxy. Young people who take a year off to work as volunteers in disaster relief or teach in poor colonies. Each of these normal people was changing minds. A human grandmother is helping alien kids at a school on a faraway colony. An artist from Earth works with musicians from Quillian to make something new. A doctor who is a person who works for free at a medical clinic in a world that is recovering from war. Every time they talked, the old ideas got weaker. Every time a normal person did something nice, other species had to rethink what they thought they knew. Jake saw a news story about a man named Tommy who was giving free music lessons to alien kids on a station in the Outer Rim. Tommy was just a normal guy who loved music and wanted to share it with others. But to the aliens who met him, he was a game changer. Did people really do things like this? For nothing? Just because they wanted to? Another report talked about a woman named Beth who set up a neighborhood watch program on a colony with people and animals where crime had been a problem. She got people, Zenthari, Quillians, and Draconi to all work together to keep their neighborhood safe. Beth thought it was a normal, everyday thing. But the news was acting like it was a miracle that two different species could work together. Jake now knew what was going on. The galaxy had only ever seen a human's resume. The parts that are impressive. The skills, accomplishments, and abilities. They had never seen the heart of humanity. The parts that didn't fit on a CV. The kindness, the sense of community, and the real concern for others. But there was also pushback. Not everyone liked that people's views of humanity were changing. The Krovan hegemony's whole military strategy was based on hiring human soldiers and mercenaries. They made a lot of money off of how people thought of them as cold, efficient warriors. Now they were spreading false information that this was all a trick. That people were only being nice to get ahead in politics. Some of the businesses that hired people were also worried. People might demand better treatment if they were valued for their kindness instead of just their productivity. More money. More respect. Some members of other species just couldn't believe they had been wrong about humans for so long. They thought it was easier to believe this was all fake than to admit they had been wrong about a whole species for 200 years. People began to threaten Jake. Messages from people he didn't know saying he was ruining the reputation of all of humanity. That he was making people look weak. That being nice wasn't a sign of strength. But for every threatening message he also got 100 messages of support. From people thanking him for showing the galaxy who they really were. From aliens who said they wished they had met humans like him sooner. From veterans of all kinds thanking Veterans Harbor for what it had done for them. One night, Rothax found Jake in the office reading messages. The dragon said, "You look worried, my friend," and then sat down on the sturdy furniture. Jake said, "I'm just thinking about how strange all of this is. I gave up my seat on a plane. That was 6 months ago. Now there are trade deals, diplomatic breakthroughs, and academic papers that look at what it all means. It seems way too big for what really happened." Rothax laughed in a low, rumbling way. "You still don't see it, do you? You didn't just give up a seat, Jake. You let the galaxy see people in a new way. You showed them that what they thought they knew wasn't enough. You were the crack in the wall, and now the whole wall is falling down." Jake looked at his friend. "Is that okay?" Rothax said, "It is true. And the truth is always better than lies that make you feel good, even when the truth is hard to understand. Jake could see the workshop floor from outside the office window. People and aliens working together. Laughing with each other. Teaching one another. Making something that was important. Rodhax might have been right. This might have been about more than just fixing ships. This might have been about fixing something bigger. Something that had been broken for a long time. The galaxy's view of people was changing. And somehow, Jake Miller, a regular mechanic from Earth, had become the person who started that change. He still didn't know how he felt about it. But after watching the workshop and seeing what they had made together, he thought it might be okay. It might even turn out to be something special. It had been 2 years since Jake gave up his seat on that flight. 2 years that made everything different. And now he was in the Grand Assembly Hall on Unity Prime, the capital world of the whole Commonwealth, surrounded by more power and importance than he had ever thought possible. The hall was huge. It went up for what looked like half a mile, with balconies and viewing platforms stacked on top of each other all the way to a domed ceiling that let you see the stars. There were representatives from 400 different species in the space. Some people sat in regular seats. Others floated in special fields that kept them safe. Some were hanging from the ceiling. Some were clouds of particles held together by electromagnetic fields. There were examples of every kind of intelligent life here. Jake Miller, a 34-year-old mechanic from Earth, stood in the middle of it all. He was wearing his cleanest jumpsuit because it was the only thing he had that was even a little bit formal. He had tried to buy something nicer for this event, but nothing at the stores on Kepler Station fit him well. So there he was, at the most important government meeting in the whole galaxy, looking like he was about to crawl under a ship and change its oil. Rodhax stood next to him, and the dragon was clearly dressed for the event. His scales had been polished until they shone like rubies in the hall's lights. The veteran's purple sash across his chest had been washed and pressed. He stood up straight and looked like the famous war hero he was. Jake's hands kept shaking. The council speaker was in the front of the hall. The speaker was a Valorian, which is a type of intelligent gas that lived in a perfect sphere of energy. As the speaker spoke, colors swirled inside the sphere. A translation field turned those color patterns into words that everyone could understand. Jake Miller of Earth, the speaker's voice, which had been translated, echoed through the hall. The Council of Species has called you to receive the Star of Commonwealth, which is the highest civilian award that this governing body can give. The hall was quiet. 400 species and thousands of individuals were all watching Jake. The speaker went on to say, in 200 years of human membership in the Commonwealth, no human has ever received this honor. You are the first. A floating platform came down from above, bringing with it a crystal medallion that looked like it had a piece of real starlight in it. The light inside pulsed softly like a heart beating. Jake's hands shook as he reached out and took it. The crystal felt warm to the touch and was surprisingly heavy. Thank you, Jake was able to say, but his voice barely carried in the big room. I don't know what to say. I just tried to do the right thing. That's exactly why you're here, the speaker said. The colors inside the sphere changed to warm oranges and golds, which Jake's cultural training told him meant approval and respect. But then the speaker's colors changed to more formal blues and purples. That is not the main reason we called you here today, though. Jake looked at Rodhax with a blank look on his face. The dragon gave him a little nod to show that he was on the right track. The Council of Species has been arguing for 6 months, the speaker said. We have looked at what has happened in the last 2 years. We have looked at the research that Dr. Quillix and others have published. We have looked at how human-alien interactions have changed across Commonwealth space. And we have come to a conclusion. The speaker stopped, and it felt like everyone in the hall was holding their breath. The speaker said, we suggest the Miller Initiative be made. A galaxy-wide program of cultural exchange, but not like any exchange program that has existed before. This will not involve diplomats or corporate representatives or military liaisons. This will be ordinary citizens. Regular people from all species, living and working and learning among each other. Sharing not just information but lives. The hall went wild. Some parts cheered. Others yelled their objections. People argued in more than a dozen languages. The noise was too much. Jake stood still, trying to make sense of what he had just heard. They were going to name a program after him? A program for the whole galaxy? The speaker's colors changed to bright reds, which meant order. The hall got quieter over time. The speaker said, there is a lot of disagreement on this issue. We all agree that Jake Miller should be able to speak to the council before they vote. He has earned that right. What? Jake's heart was beating so fast that he could hear it in his ears. Talk to the council? Talk in front of all these people? He worked as a mechanic. He worked on engines. He didn't give speeches to the galaxy's most powerful government. A small platform floated over to Jake and stopped in front of him. It had a microphone that stuck out. "Speak from your heart, my friend," Rodhax said as he bent down. "That's all they need to hear." Jake walked up to the mic. He thought his legs might give out. He looked out at the thousands of people who were looking at him with their eyes, optical sensors, and other sensory organs. "I'm just a mechanic," Jake said at first, and his voice broke a little. He coughed and tried again. "I'm just a mechanic from Earth. I fix starship engines for a living. I'm not a diplomat or a politician, and I don't really get what people talk about in places like this." Some of the representatives moved around in their seats. A few people looked like they were disappointed. This wasn't a big speech. "2 years ago, I went on vacation on a ship," Jake said next. "I had saved up for a first-class ticket. I was really excited because I had never flown first class before. Then I saw an old soldier who needed that seat more than I did, so I gave it to him. That's all I did. I gave up a seat." Jake looked at Rodhax, who nodded to show that he agreed. "I didn't do it because I'm special or a hero. I did it because it was the right thing to do. It was what any decent person would do. At least that's what I thought. But apparently that was news. That was shocking. It was so unusual that 17 million people watched a video of it." Jake stopped for a moment to think. Now the hall was completely quiet. Everyone was paying attention. And that's when I realized something. The galaxy didn't know us. Didn't know humans, I mean. You knew our soldiers and our business people and our scientists, but you didn't know regular humans. The kind who bake cookies for their neighbors. The kind who volunteer at hospitals. The kind who help a stranger change a tire on the side of the road. You didn't know that humans do stuff like that all the time, every day, because it's just what we do. Jake's voice got louder. The shaking was over. Maybe we weren't as different as we thought. Maybe we just needed to meet each other. Not as diplomats in fancy meetings. Not as soldiers on opposite sides. Just as people. Or, well, beings. Whatever we are. If one person being nice to a stranger can change how we see each other, then maybe we weren't as different as we thought. He looked around the room and tried to meet as many people's eyes as he could. "I like the Miller Initiative. Not because it's named after me, honestly that's kind of embarrassing. But because it means more regular people will get to know each other. There will be more chances for kindness, more chances to surprise each other in good ways, and more chances to realize that we're not as scary, strange, or different as we thought." Jake stepped away from the microphone, sure that he was done. But Rodhax kept going, and Jake saw that the dragon wanted to talk as well. Rodhax said in a formal way, "I ask permission to speak to the council." The speaker's colors changed to greens, which meant that permission had been given. Rodhax looked out at the people who had come to see him. He had fought with and against many of them in wars over the years. Rodhax said in a deep voice that was easy to hear in the hall, "I have to admit something. Something I haven't told anyone but Jake Miller." The dragon stopped, and Jake saw feelings on his old face that he had never seen before. "I had already made up my mind that the day Jake Miller gave me his seat would be my last." Gasping sounds filled the hall. Representatives who had been fidgeting or looking at data pads suddenly gave Rodhax their full attention. "I am 412 years old," Rodhax said again. "I have seen governments rise and fall. I've seen everyone I loved turn to dust. My whole battalion died in the Void Border Wars. Every dragon I trained with, fought with, and celebrated victories with is gone. I am the last of the Crimson Wing. I am the last one who remembers our battles, our sacrifices, and our songs." Rodhax's voice got softer and more personal. "I have more money than I know what to do with. I have titles and honors. Everyone in the Commonwealth respects me. But I was so tired. So alone. The guilt of surviving for 4 centuries was too much to bear." Jake's throat felt tight. Rodhax had never told him how close he had come that day. "I got on that ship with the intention of ending my journey," Rodhax said. "I was going to fly to a faraway world and just let go. Stop fighting. Stop being the last one left." The dragon looked at Jake. Then this person, a stranger who owed me nothing and had never met me before, saw an old soldier having trouble and decided to help. Not because he wanted to be recognized, not because he expected payment, not because someone told him to. He helped because he saw someone else in need and couldn't walk past without offering comfort. Rodhax's eyes were shining now, and Jake was shocked to see that the old dragon was crying. Real tears running down the cheeks of Scales. "That little act of kindness reminded me that there is still good in the galaxy worth living for," Rodhax said. "It made me remember that there are still people who care about others, who see pain and choose to ease it, and who value honor, service, and basic decency. The dragon stood up straight. Jake Miller saved my life, but not with medicine or a heroic rescue. He saved it by showing me that there is still kindness in this huge galaxy. If one random person can have such grace in their heart, then maybe there are others. Maybe there are beings of all kinds who have such grace. Maybe I just hadn't been looking in the right places. Rothax turned around to speak to the whole council. I have fought in 13 major campaigns. I have killed enemies and watched friends die. I have negotiated treaties and broken sieges. But the most important thing I have ever seen was a mechanic from Earth comforting an old soldier he had never met. That moment changed everything for me. And if this initiative lets more moments like that happen, then I support it with all my heart. When Rothax was done, the hall was completely quiet. There was no movement. Nobody said anything. Then, from one part of the gallery, a Quillian representative made a gesture of deep respect in their culture by touching all of their tentacles to their body. A different Quillian joined. Then a Zenthari came. Then a Draconi. The gesture spread through the hall like a wave, with each species showing respect in its own way. The speaker's colors changed to show a range of feelings. The council will now vote on the Miller Initiative. It took 15 minutes for each representative to cast their vote. Jake could see the count on screens all over the hall. The numbers went up. The speaker said, 328 species voted in favor, 71 abstained, and 1 opposed. The Miller Initiative is now Commonwealth policy. People in the hall cheered. People from dozens of different species surrounded Jake and Rothax to congratulate them and ask questions about how the program would work. Jake was tired, overwhelmed, and strangely emotional. He had come to space in search of excitement and maybe a good job. He had, however, somehow become a part of something much bigger than himself. Rothax put a huge claw on Jake's shoulder. How does it feel to change the galaxy, buddy? Jake thought about it for a while. That's strange. Very strange. But also kind of true, you know? The dragon laughed in a way that sounded like rocks rolling. Come on. Let's go back to Kepler Station. We have to fix ships and help veterans. The real work is still going on. And that was exactly what they did. 5 years later, the Miller Initiative was the most successful cultural exchange program in the history of the Commonwealth. Millions of people from hundreds of different species traveled to live and work with people from other cultures. Not as soldiers, diplomats, or corporate workers, but as teachers, artists, volunteers, and neighbors. The results were better than anyone had thought they would be. There were more marriages between different species. Art projects that involved more than one person thrived. People from very different cultures made new friends. Long-held biases began to break down. Jake Miller still ran his repair shop on Kepler Station. Veterans Harbor had grown to 40 different locations in Commonwealth space, but Jake's original shop was still where he worked. There were always a lot of people in the store. Humans worked with Draconi, Zenthari, Quillians, and 50 other kinds of people. Above the main entrance, a sign said, "Service, dignity, kindness, the true measure of civilization." Jake was working on a broken compression coil under a ship when he heard kids laughing outside. He rolled out on his repair dolly and looked in the direction of the noise. There was a small park next to the store where a girl about 8 years old was playing with a young Draconi that was still a hatchling. They were running around the trees and laughing like kids do. Their parents, one a human and one a dragon, were sitting on a bench nearby and talking about normal things like the weather and school schedules. This was happening over and over again on hundreds of worlds. Kids from Earth and kids from space growing up together. Learning how to speak each other's languages. Playing each other's games. Making friends that their parents' generation didn't have the time to make. Jake smiled and went back under the ship to finish his work. Rothax walked into the store with supplies, ducking through the strong door they had put in just for him. "Are you still glad you gave up that first-class seat?" the dragon asked. He asked Jake this question at least once a week. Jake smiled even though his face was covered in grease. "That was the best choice I ever made." Rothax laughed out loud. "Jake Miller, you changed the galaxy with a small act of kindness." "No," Jake said as he tightened a bolt with his wrench. "I just reminded the galaxy what kindness looks like." The change happened when everyone else decided to believe in it, practice it, and spread it. The human child and the dragon hatchling played outside under stars that weren't from this world. Inside, mechanics from a dozen different species worked together to fix ships, tell jokes, and build something that mattered. People had not changed. They had always been able to be very nice. The galaxy had finally figured out who they really were. And the galaxy chose to accept it after seeing it. All because one mechanic thought an old soldier needed a nice place to sit. That was the legacy of Jake Miller. Not big speeches or political successes. Just basic kindness shown to a stranger that spread out until it reached the whole galaxy. And in the end that was enough. More than enough. It was all of it.